Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar from the Institute of Packaging Professionals. Again, I'm Jim George, the Director of Education for IOPP, and welcome to our presentation. And we've got a real interesting topic this month. Now, we're all universally in search of the next great innovation, whether it's for our product, our package, or processes, or whatever. But sometimes we get so focused in chasing the outcome that we lose sight of the steps we need to take to get to that finish line. That goes for consumer electronics packaging, which happens to be our area of focus all this month in our IOPP Spotlight program, or for that matter, really in any area of packaging. So we've got a very diverse audience on the line today, and I think today's presentation will help us to get refocused with the right mindset for innovation. So if you're here for the presentation, 9 steps to turn your organization into an innovation powerhouse, you're in the right place. And so this morning we welcome Scott Beyondich, who is familiar to many of you. Scott is a longtime IOPP member in the Southeastern chapter, and he helps companies commercialize new packages and products. Scott was with the Coca-Cola Company for many years, including a number of years as group director, in which he grew Coca-Cola's North American sparkling business through innovation and leadership. So as we begin our presentation, let me remind you again that you can type any questions you might have for Scott in the questions field on your screen, and we'll hold all the questions until the end of his presentation, and then at that time we'll get to as many of your questions as possible. So I think we're ready for a very insightful next hour. And Scott, if you're ready to begin, I'll turn things over to you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Good morning, everybody. I hope everybody's doing great this morning, and I'm excited to spend some time with you talking about packaging innovation. But before we get started, I'd just like to take a quick opportunity to thank IOPP, Jim, and Chris for this opportunity to be with you this morning. And I'm just waiting for the first slide to advance here. So I want to quickly cover a little bit on my background. Jim's touched on some of this already. I spent the majority of my career working in the innovation and new product space at both Coca-Cola and Alcoa. And in my last position at Coke, I was a group director responsible for sparkling packaging development and immediate consumption equipment development across North America. So the packaging piece included primary, secondary, and tertiary packaging, and the equipment piece included vending machines, coolers, and beverage dispensers. And my team and I commercialized about 35 new products over the last 5 years. And as Jim mentioned, I'm actively involved in IOPP and in the Southeast chapter, and I'm also on the editorial boards for Packaging Digest magazine and the Can Maker magazine. And I just recently started my own consulting business where I like to help other companies with innovation. I really love working on new products and work from ideation all the way through full commercialization. I help with innovation processes, and I also have a partner network to provide services that I cannot provide myself. I'm trying to advance the slide again. There we go. So these are some of the innovations that I have been a part of. I'm sure all of you are familiar with Share a Coke, which is up in the upper right-hand corner. I started a lot of the work that's occurred around the world on aluminum bottles. I've also developed vessels or drinking cups and have worked with thermochromic inks as well as a variety of secondary packages as you see here.
You having trouble with the slide advance?
I am, yes.
Okay, just give us a heads up and we'll do it for you.
Okay, thank you.
Technical glitch.
Okay, so you can advance the slide, please. Okay. So let's get down to this morning's topic of innovation. I'm going to share a number of things that you can either start or improve upon based on your current innovation process. Innovation should help ward off your competitors. It should positively impact the price point of your products, your share price, and even your customers' price points and share price, and ultimately keep your company in business. If you could advance the slide, please. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't want to be this guy. Depending upon how innovation is done, it can be very painful, but at the same time, if done properly, it can be fun and innovating and invigorating. In my job at Coke, I had the responsibility for growth, productivity or cost savings, and sustainability. And innovation is really what got me excited about coming to work every day. I started my career at Coke in corporate R&D, and after being there a while, my job was starting to turn into exactly that. It was starting to turn into work. And probably the best thing I did was make a change and move to our North America division. It got me closer to the consumer with shorter development timelines, and it really re-energized me. And today we're going to talk about some ways to make your innovation process more welcoming to associates. Okay? So number one, leaders have to be committed. You can advance the slide. Innovation really has to be a priority, and the support has to be top-down. The week before last, I was speaking to another group that had many CEOs in the audience, and I made sure that they understood their role here. Leaders can't say innovation is important and then never talk about it again. You have to talk about it all the time. I mean, think about it. When do things really sink in? When we hear it repeatedly, again and again. Leaders need to set goals and provide regular updates. Does your company want to launch so many new products in a year? Do you want a certain % of sales to come from new products? Leaders need to set these metrics and share a dashboard at least quarterly during their all-hands meetings. Okay? Now, I'm not sure if any of you recognize this gentleman. His name is Paul O'Neill, and he is a past Treasury Secretary for the U.S. And prior to this role, he was a CEO at Alcoa when I was there. And I feel he is a great example of top-down leadership. Now, instead of the topic being packaging innovation, it was safety, but you'll get the point here. When Paul came into the organization, Alcoa had a high number of accidents, lost work days, and fatalities. And to Paul, this was totally unacceptable. He wanted Alcoa to be best in class, but we were far from it. He benchmarked the industry, and not just heavy metals or the metal industry, but all of industries. I mean, if you think about the metals industry, you've got molten metal, you've got automatically guided vehicles, you've got coils that weigh tens of thousands of pounds. But he didn't want to compare us to that. He compared ourselves, or Alcoa, to everybody in industry. And at that time, DuPont was incredible in terms of their safety performance, and they actually became our target. And no matter where Paul went, no matter who he talked to, the first thing he talked about was safety, where Alcoa was and where we were going. He started his talks to employees like this. He started his talks at community events like a Rotary Club like this, and even his calls and meetings with Wall Street. And guess what? Did we improve? There was absolutely no doubt in the organization that safety was our #1 priority. And we made incredible progress, and in only a few short years, we were where DuPont was when we started. But guess what? They kept improving, so they actually became a moving target for us. To me, this really illustrates the power of leadership. Okay. And this also happened with the Share a Coke project at Coca-Cola. Muhtar Kent, our CEO, told North America that we were going to launch this and when. He really pushed innovation. Now, I wish we had actually decided to launch this ourselves because we probably would have given ourselves more time. This innovation originally launched in Australia, and then a number of groups and divisions in Europe picked it up. So you might think it was a matter of just reapplication. But due to the high speeds that we run in the North America business, we run laminated labels because they have much more strength. Other markets run monolayer labels, so the project was not just a simple reapplication. But we did pull it off, and it delivered incredible results. Last year, it grew brand Coke and actually grew the whole soft drink portfolio for Coke North America. Okay. Number 2 is culture and climate. And it's critical that you have the right culture and the climate to foster innovation. Okay. So culture is really the organization's values, beliefs, and assumptions. Climate, on the other hand, is behavior, attitudes, and feelings. And you think of culture and climate like a person. We all have personalities that define us, and our personality tends to stay relatively the same over time. And this is like an organization's culture. On the other hand, we also have moods, and these tend to change, obviously, much more regularly, and this is like climate. So when you want to move an organization's culture, start by working on the climate. It's short-term, and you can make an immediate impact. Now, listed here are a number of characteristics that make for a good innovation climate. Challenge and involvement. We all know associates want to be challenged. We want to be challenged. This helps engagement. We all want to be involved. We want to help shape things as our company progresses. Organizations should also tolerate smart risk-taking. This is not the approach of, oh, it's okay to take a risk as long as you're successful. I mean, really? You hear that a lot from companies and people that work at different companies, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret here. If all the people on projects that fail get let go by a company, other people figure that out. People tend to be smart that way. And guess what happens? Then nobody takes risks. Nobody wants to stretch. Everything becomes conservative, and innovation ends up declining. Next, it's okay to have fun at work. Sorry, I'm back on the previous slide. Thank you. Okay. Fun and laughter aid creativity. Work is a 4-letter word, so have some fun once in a while and make it more palatable. Conflict and debate. These are other good things to have in the workplace. These, again, improve our ideas. You can build on it and challenge people. But often you'll hear some leaders say, I want people to challenge my thinking and the thinking of others, yet everyone in the organization knows that this particular leader tends to surround themselves with yes men and yes women. Did I mention that people are smart and figure things out? That's why you hired them in the first place. So if you want challenge, you have to walk the talk. There are 4 other things here that help set up the right type of climate, and I'm going to cover some of these later in the presentation. Okay. I'd like to share with you a great example of climate change that I experienced at Coke. A new person shown here named Mark Mathieu came in to run the marketing organization for global soft drinks. Now, Mark had been the president of Coca-Cola France and was very, very successful in his role there. When he came into this new role, he created what he called a manifesto for growth, because soft drinks were declining, brand Coke was declining, and Mark was brought in to basically turn things around. And he did it. Now, how did he do it? Climate change was a big part of that. Coke was coat and tie at that time. Mark wore jeans and T-shirts. He showed up at work sometimes unshaven, again, what you didn't see. And he took his team and he moved them across the street from where everybody is. So he moved them across North Avenue into our training area. And then they created their whole new open work environment. The other thing he did is he was laser sharp in terms of focusing his team on innovation, and he really, truly empowered his people. He was so charismatic that when I would hear him speak, I left his meetings just fired up and ready to take on the world. And I remember how he challenged and inspired his team by using an analogy to the Beatles. He simply asked the rhetorical question, if 4 guys could change the world, why can't we? He made everybody believe anything was possible. And he was in charge when we came up with the idea for the contour aluminum bottle that you see here. And we went in and presented to him and suggested that we launch it in one market, and that if it did really well, our bottlers around the world would notice it and then jump on board. And Mark pretty much flatly told us he didn't like our idea, and we were all kind of flabbergasted. He said, you guys need to think bigger. And what he did was he challenged us, and he told us to launch this package on the same night in the top nightclubs around the world. Now, how did Mark do in his role? He and his team grew brand Coke, they grew soft drinks, and then our CEO, Neville Isdell, adopted Mark's terminology, the Manifesto for Growth, and used it as the name of the plan for the entire company. Okay? This might seem obvious, but if you're going to innovate, you need to create an innovation strategy. Okay? You have to tell people where you're going and how you plan to get there. You need to find white space and react to what your competition is doing. This needs to be done both for your direct competitors, your industry, and other products that compete for your customers or consumers' dollar. When I worked at Coke, do you think my only competition was Pepsi or another soft drink company? Absolutely not. When a consumer entered a convenience store, for example, we were competing with candy bars, with ice cream, and other types of similar products. Your innovation strategy process, again, needs to be open like we talked about before. Remember we mentioned that associates want to feel involved and informed. Your strategy needs to be developed at a specific point in time, and therefore it tends to need to be a living or flexible document that evolves over time. Okay? You need to have a 360-degree idea process. Okay? Ideas come from the 4 different sources listed here: associates, customers, the public, and your supply chain. And in addition to your customers telling you what they want, you should also schedule listening visits and probe and find out where their pain points are. Now, guess where the best ideas usually come from? That's right, it's the associates of the company. And that's because they know the business challenges, the business needs, customer and consumer needs, technology advances that are impacting the business, and you really need to be able to synthesize all of these together to create the best ideas. So I'd like to ask, what is your company doing to encourage your associates to submit ideas? Do you have a process? Do associates who submit ideas hear back? Or do their ideas go into a black hole? Okay. This is a new product I recently became aware of that allows for all of this that I just talked about on both a private intra-company level or on a public level. The private version is called iLab, and the public version is called Bright Idea Lab. And you could basically think of this as Match.com for ideas. So this is a software tool that connects people who have ideas with people and companies that are looking for ideas. It allows for searches, for people to connect. It provides feedback and communication mechanisms. In a way, it's almost like Match.com and Facebook kind of combined. And if you have any interest in learning more about this, you can follow up with me after the webinar, and I can tell you more about this product. Okay? Associate engagement is really critical for the innovation process. We've already talked about this. Now we'll go into a little bit more detail. Okay? Engaged employees are happier employees, and they tend to be more productive. Associates need to feel valued, that their work is valued, and that their ideas are valued. I've already discussed some ways of improving engagement. I'm going to cover some additional ways in the coming slides, so let's keep moving to the next one. Okay. Mindset. We need to move from a conventional mindset to an entrepreneurial mindset. We are all entrepreneurs, okay? It's like creativity. Everybody is creative. Having an entrepreneurial mindset is not a business model. It's just how we think. And individuals with entrepreneurial mindsets tend to be drawn towards opportunities, innovation, and new value creation. Okay. This project, I believe, required entrepreneurial thinking in terms of finding a solution and making this work commercially. This is a 1x6 paperboard pack that contains 12-ounce cans, and the goal was to run this on a commercial line. And our equipment could not run a 1x6 pack, and investing in all that new capital really wasn't an opportunity when you're trying something new. So the solution ended up being to run it like a fridge pack, but there was paperboard with perforations that held the two packs together. And thus, you could fill these two 1x6s just like a fridge pack, and then palletize it and distribute it. And once the package arrived at the store, the merchandiser could break the packs apart and separate them into two. And both of these had never been done before. The idea of holding two packages together with the material in the package, and the idea of having the store merchandiser actually do something more than just moving product from a pallet onto a shelf. Okay. And just like anything you're going to do, you need tools. So we're going to talk about some innovation tools. Okay. I've listed just a few tools here, and there are software products that make many of these processes a lot simpler and more convenient to use. And we use processes for a purpose. It's to provide structure and discipline. And these processes also help us make difficult decisions. And I'd like to share a couple of quick examples with you. StageGate should help you kill projects, which a lot of companies have trouble doing. Portfolio analysis helps you make sure that you have a diversified portfolio and that the projects that you're working on deliver the best value. Dashboards allow you to quickly assess your total innovation process and projects. How many projects do you have? What stages are they in? Does their discounted value deliver the financial results that you need? Because all the things in your funnel aren't necessarily going to make it to the end, which is why I talked about the discounted value. So let's just quickly talk through an example here. Let's assume you're a brand manager. If you could go back, please. Yep. So let's assume you're a brand manager and you're going to launch an ice-cold beverage. When do you think you'd want to launch that new beverage? April ends up being a really good month because that way your product is in full distribution before the summer. So now let's change your role. Let's assume now that you're an innovation executive at the same beverage company and you're looking over your dashboard. So let's just assume that your company has 150 new product projects and that 50 of them are beverages. Do you think the new beverage rollouts, these 50 products, are scheduled out to commercialize evenly across the year? Probably not. What's more or less probably occurred is every brand manager has scheduled their product to launch in the first week of April. Now, is that what's really best for the company? I don't think so. So somebody has to be keeping an eye on the big picture at all times, and dashboards are a great way to do that. Okay. I talked about the fact that processes and tools help provide structure and discipline. So when do you think people feel it's necessary to forego process or walk away from it? It tends to happen when people get pressured. And I was working with a company recently that had a business unit, and they had great success commercializing new products because they always did a pilot first. And if you do pilots and you have problems, you can contain them. They're small. You can fix them before you go national. Other business units within this company had a totally different approach. They were always going national and having problems. Now, the other business units noticed what the one business unit was doing with the pilots, saw their success, and started copying this. But while this was happening, the first business unit came under pressure to deliver results. And they ended up walking away from process and started taking shortcuts. And they decided to go national right out of the gate. And you already know what happened. And I like this saying. I heard it when I was going to be a parent for the first time, and it applies to our projects as well. Little kids, little problems. Big kids, big problems. So if you do a pilot and have problems, they're small, you can fix them. If you go national right out of the gate and have a problem, you've got a huge problem. That's probably going to get your company a lot of unwanted negative PR. Okay? Reward and recognition. You need to be celebrating at work. Remember when we talked about having fun? And this is just one way to have fun at work. And don't just celebrate successful projects. Celebrate milestones if you're working on big bets that are multi-year projects. Celebrate when associates and teams demonstrate the right kind of behaviors. Okay? Now, some celebrations should be like this. They should be formal. Maybe your company does this or should set up annual awards that recognize innovation, that recognize new product launches. You recognize associates who've received patents. Okay? But I think what also is really, really important, maybe even more important, is showing appreciation informally. Tell people face-to-face. Send them notes. Send them emails to let people know that they're appreciated. The experts say that we should send out positive reinforcement at a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio if you compare it to constructive criticism. I mean, how many of you like to be thanked and praised for your work? It makes us feel good. It makes us want to do more. It makes us want to work harder. So why don't more managers do it? And maybe more importantly, why don't we do it? It's so easy for me to see how I want to be treated, yet so hard to treat other people the same way because we just get so busy, we get tied up with things. I love to be encouraged. And in college, I had an advisor that used what I called at that time the sunshine pump. Every time I got down in the dumps and didn't feel like my research was going in the right direction, I'd go visit him, and he would tell me how good I was and all about the great things I was doing, and my mood quickly changed from negative to bright and sunny. I love the sunshine pump. I think most people love the sunshine pump. At one point in my career, I had a boss who didn't know that I liked the sunshine pump, so I told him. And guess what? He never changed. He didn't have to. He was my boss, but he really missed out on a great way to motivate me and get more work out of me. And that's something that we all need to keep in mind. Okay? Continuous learning. Just like in our field of work, we must continually be a student of innovation. First, everybody needs to get trained so that the organization is on the same level and speaking the same language. Best practice will be developed internally and externally, and these need to be leveraged. This is where post-project reviews come into play. Remember when we were talking about process and stage gate? After a team launches a new product, they need to get back together and see how they did, talk about how they did. What worked well? What didn't? How good were their assumptions? How good were their forecasts? They need to capture this organizational learning and make sure that it gets socialized. Okay. I think we need to advance one more slide. Thank you. So I was involved in a project a few years ago where we were going to convert from two-piece polypropylene closures to one-piece polyethylene. And this move also involves, as many of you may know, moving the seal area from the top side to a bore seal. And unfortunately, there really weren't any learnings or best practices or watchouts that had been shared around the organization. So if that's not happening, what you've got to do on your packaging project is go out there and find it. Make sure you know it. Take advantage of that work that other people have done. So I reached out and contacted the markets that had previously communicated one piece and sought out all their organizational learning. I learned as much as I could from these others before we even set out on our project, and it really helped us avoid a lot of pitfalls. Okay. So I've kind of covered the 9 different things at this point. And if you only remember 2 things from my presentation, the 2 things I would want you to remember are, okay, to be a leader. We are all leaders every day. And we lead in different ways, even if we don't have a leader title. Lead by example. Demonstrate the right behaviors. If you see something that needs to be done and it's not your job, do it. And second, what I think is really important for all of us is to make sure that other people realize and appreciate that they're appreciated, or that they understand they're appreciated. You know how much it means to you to get positive feedback. It means a lot to your colleagues too. So take the time to share that feedback with them. Okay. Now, one of the things I know is when I go to training, I get all excited about what I learned, and I have great intentions, but when I get back to the office and I'm back in the real world, I don't have time anymore, and it seems like a lot of us tend to forget about what we learned in our training classes. But I want to share a couple of things here that I think you can do that'll really have an impact on your work every day. So when you get back to the office, the 2 things that I'd like to request you do are, okay, number 1 is slow down. We are actually more creative when we're refreshed. We're going to be more innovative. We're going to have better ideas. So take a break. Take a break during the day. Take your vacation. Break away from your electronic device. Really try and be in the moment. Here's a little experiment I did a number of months ago, and you may want to try this too. Look around the table the next time you're in a big meeting and see what everybody else is doing when somebody else in the room is talking. Look around and see who's paying attention. What I found is nobody was. Everybody in the room had a laptop and or a cell phone, and everybody was busy multitasking. I mean, we all have enough to do as it is. We all have enough meetings. Why go to a meeting and then not participate? We're there for a reason. There must have been something important, otherwise we shouldn't have had the meeting in the first place. So if that's what's happening in the meetings, guess who's listening to you when it's your turn to talk and you have something important to say? When I look at the situation, I kind of feel like we're becoming the new fast draw society. When that text message or email comes in and our cell phone or smartphone makes that little bing or chime, you better watch out, because we can draw that phone out quicker than anybody could ever imagine. We're just so addicted to it. The other thing I'd like to challenge you on is to take time to think. And I mean really think. And I know I was personally caught in this trap. I was so busy every day at work. When I got home at night, I was doing work, and on the weekends, I never stopped to think enough. There was just so much to do as running from one project to the next or one meeting to the next. And this is the one item that really supports an innovation climate. So you need to try to take time to think. And for the leaders that are on the call right now, give your people time to think. You know, a lot of the more innovative companies, and I know you've probably heard this, give their people 10% of their time to think. This isn't just a think, but really to explore, to play, and there's money to support some of this early work. We're all just too busy today to think. And we can't keep doing more with less. I keep hearing that again and again, but at some point, there's only going to be one person left if we keep doing more with less. We think we're getting more out of people by working them harder and giving them more projects, and we're really not. We are working on too many projects that don't matter. And that really gets us back to portfolio analysis. What we really need to do is figure out which projects are really going to move the needle for our business. Okay. So in wrapping up, I'd like to share this often recited quote from Charles Darwin. It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, rather the one most responsive to change. Things are changing, and we all keep hearing that the rate of change is increasing. We need to adapt, we need to evolve, and we need to innovate to survive. There are so many new technologies emerging. The pace of that is quickening, and there are all these new business models that are emerging at an alarming rate, an explosive rate. It's putting other businesses and business models out of business. I mean, it makes me think of another often quoted innovation saying, it's all about, it's innovate or die. Okay. I'd like to thank you all for your attention this morning, and I wish you the best of luck with your innovation projects and your packaging work. I'd appreciate the opportunity to work with you, and if we do a project as a result of the webinar today, just mention that you're on this webinar, and I'd be happy to give you a discount on the work. Okay? And here's my contact information. So I've got a website here and an email and a phone number. Thank you very much for your time, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. And a lot of really, common sense and well thought out tips and ideas there. And I think sometimes we just need to get back and like you say, slow down and think a little bit. And a lot of the stuff really makes a lot of sense if we take the time to think things through. So, well, appreciate your. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate your point, Jim, and that's what I wanted to do here today was really share some things that are practical or that you could apply. Too many times I hear presentations and there's not really much I can take back. So I wanted to make this more usable. And I know a lot of companies out there have people working in the innovation space using these processes, but we don't necessarily use them all the time or use them properly, and we're skipping steps. And a lot of times those can end up burning us.
Right. Okay. Well, let's get into the Q&A period now. I know we've got a lot of people that are anxious to ask for your additional thoughts. So again, for those of you who may have come on a minute or two after we began this morning, you can type your questions into the question area on the screen, and we'll try to get to them, as many of them as possible. So, Scott, I want to start off with just an overall question. With all of your experience in packaging and business, what's the most important lesson you've learned about innovation over the years?
Yeah, good question. I've mentioned this probably a couple of times as we were going through the webinar, and to me, it's the importance of process. Really, the structure and discipline that it applies. Don't take the shortcuts. Make sure you're doing pilots. Make sure you're doing those project reviews. A couple of things I didn't mention that kind of tie into this whole thing around process is about having a plan B or a backup plan. So even though we have the best intentions, not everything goes right even in our successful launches. So you really need to work through what could go wrong and what is your response if those things do happen. And that's also kind of tied into understanding your risks, and then, you know, as you're working through the project, working on ways to eliminate those risks or mitigate those, but you might not be able to eliminate everything, and you need to have a plan, again, or a process to deal with problems when they arise.
Okay, and I think you also made the point that need to be a little bit more selective in the projects that really matter. It's a roadblock to innovation is trying to do too many things at once, I would suspect, too.
I totally agree. I've not talked to a single person in my entire career who said they didn't have enough to work on. Most people complain about the workload and that they've just got more to do than they're capable of doing. What that ends up doing is it impacts quality. And at the end of the day, a lot of projects that we're working on really don't have a big impact on the business in terms of, now sometimes we have to do those if it's for a certain customer. You know, there are circumstances where we work on things that maybe the business case isn't as strong as it needs to be. Another one could be if the CEO or your boss tells you to work on it. But if you look at the projects that an innovation group is bringing forward or a packaging team is bringing forward, and you do a Pareto on those, they tend to quickly fall off in terms of those projects that really add value. And I think a lot of organizations would do better to tail projects and put those on the other projects if that can help more quickly. So you really need to figure out where you're getting your bang from your buck and put your resources there.
Okay. Here's a really good question. I just got out of a week-long training session that teaches that leadership is everybody's responsibility. So what can I do to influence leadership to drive innovation?
That's a great question. I agree. And like I said, there's a few things I already talked about in terms of leading where you have control. Even if you're not a leader, you're still leading projects, you're leading activities, you can demonstrate the right types of behaviors. But I also think that people who are going to be leaders down the road in an organization are the kind of people that will go talk with leadership and give them ideas about how they could improve. So what I would suggest is you actually sit down with your manager and talk to them about what you believe the organization could be doing differently or better, and then raise that up through the organization. I think that's the best way to approach it, is really by starting with your manager to make sure they're on board and you don't catch them by surprise, but then really go out and have a meeting with all the people higher up in the company that touch the innovation process and talk about ways that you can improve and make advances. Okay.
And as a follow-up question, I think this is this affects a number of people on the line. What advice can you give for those who are essentially working as one-person packaging departments?
I guess I was thinking for a second there.
Okay.
To me, it's really about stepping away from your job a little bit and making sure that you're connected on the outside. How can you connect to other people? How can you connect to other organizations, other companies, whatever it might be, so that you're more aware of what's going on out there. I mean, a lot of times we hire other companies to go out and see what's going on in our marketplace. So this applies to somebody that's like a single person packaging department, but at the same time it applies to everybody as a whole. And it has to do with taking time again. Take the time. Take the time to go out in the market and see what's going on. See what is happening in other industries. See what your competition's doing. See what your company is doing. If you're in a big company, you probably don't know everything that's going on within the organization. But Jim, going back to the single person packaging team, I mean, what they really need to be doing is reaching out and expanding their network and trying to find out where those innovations are. Another thing that comes to mind are the conferences and shows, and you can get some stuff there, and a lot of what you may hear about are things you've already learned about on a website or read about in a magazine. But the really good stuff, the new stuff, is happening on the perimeter. It's the little booth that has one or two people in it, and they've got some new innovation out there, and they can't afford the gigantic booth right when you come in the door. So that's another piece of advice I'd pass along to everybody is if you're really looking for something new, when you go to an expo or to a show where there's tabletop exhibits, work the perimeter. So almost like, I guess we work the perimeter in the grocery stores, right? That's what they say. Mm-hmm. Work the perimeter of the expo or the conference because that's where the new things are that are just emerging.
Yeah, that's so true. I've found that in my experience too. I've gotten that bit of advice from a couple other people. You work the perimeter and talk to the people at the smaller booths that don't have the some of the wherewithal as the bigger companies, but that also they don't have that encumbrance either. They're much more nimble.
Exactly. Yep.
Yep. So next question here. Do you believe that non-disclosure agreements between your partner companies are critical in the innovation process?
Yes, they are. I mean, they're difficult anytime you have to put a legal agreement in place when it comes to innovation. It's a challenge. They always take much longer than it seems like they really should. So it seems like it slows down and impedes innovation, but at the same time, I believe they are necessary, especially if, and the reason you're putting them into place in the first place is because there's confidential information. So it's really needed to protect the company, the individuals who have that information. So they are a necessity. What I've done personally that has really worked well is I've tried to establish more of a personal relationship with my counterparts or even people above me at other companies and get back to what I'll call more of a gentleman's agreement, that you're really working in the best interest of both companies and that you try to draft agreements that are fair right from the get-go. Too many companies, regardless of who starts the process, they make the agreement one-sided. And then they flip it over, and weeks and months go by, and then the other company gets it and makes it one-sided to their advantage. And this is where we lose all the time. So in the spirit of partnership, in the spirit of innovation, I think you can really take a lot of time out of the process if you sit down at the table and agree on that you want to start fair right from the beginning. And one of the best things I ever did was to get the right people in the room who knew the project and the technical details, and then we also got the patent attorneys or the lawyers there who were responsible for the NDAs and the agreements, and the attorneys just listened. So we talked about how we wanted to work together, what we wanted to happen, how the companies were each going to benefit, and then the attorneys took what they heard and put that into their terminology. And I've been able to take agreements that normally would take, like I said, 6 to 12 months and knock them out in less than a month, maybe a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. But it's not going to happen unless both parties are willing to participate in that.
Sure. Okay. Good question here. When you talked about motivation and your boss, how did you motivate yourself when your boss wouldn't do it for you?
Well, that's a really good question. What I also focused on, I mean, I did like getting that external feedback, but the other thing that I focused on is what I was doing, what I was working on. So the projects and the people I was working with were what also motivated me. Coke had a commercial, and it's at the World of Coke and all that. It's called the Happiness Factory. And that's what I talked about when I came to work in the morning. I mean, I said it kind of tongue-in-cheek the first time with some of the people that I was carpooling with, but we were walking in from the parking garage one morning shortly after that came out, and I said, today's another great day of opportunity at the Happiness Factory. So, I mean, I had the opportunity to work for the #1 brand in the world and with a lot of really great people. And there's a lot of great people out there in all different companies and industries. And that's really what inspired me. So I did that at work. The other thing that, and I'm not saying this just to say it because this is an IOPP call, but the other thing that I really enjoy doing is my volunteer work through the professional associations like IOPP. And before IOPP, I was involved in a group called PDMA, which has to do with cross-functional new product development. And I've always found a lot of satisfaction in giving back to the community, helping other people understand how to innovate, how to be successful in their careers. And I've learned a lot of, I guess, leadership lessons and different things like that because of my work outside of work. So because of working with these professional associations. So I had the opportunity to take on leadership roles, and I was learning things about leadership that I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to learn at work yet. So those are a couple different things, just I guess my work, the people I was working with, and then things outside the company.
Okay. How did you address and balance sustainability issues with innovation in the Sixer launch?
On that one in particular, there's definitely more board involved in that package. Really what we were trying to do, and most of you should be able to appreciate this, is we were trying to get a package up and running, and then we were going to look at the sustainability aspect of it and what we could do differently later. One of the things I've also found to be true in innovation is if you try and do too many new things on any given project, you're going to fail. So you want to limit the number of new things that you're going to do initially, and then work on adding some of those improvements later or adding innovations later, and really kind of developing a platform, a technical platform, leveraging these different innovations. So for us, our first goal was to really figure out a way to make the package, get it to run on our equipment, get it out into the marketplace, and to see if it was going to be successful or not. We were going to spend time later looking at how to address the sustainability issues.
Okay. Next question, as a middle manager, how can I move these ideas up the management ladder? I'm especially concerned about taking time to develop the process versus pushing forward despite a lack of data.
What's going to help that the most is if you're able to get an innovation process in place at your place of employment. It's going to be very difficult to do that by yourself if the rest of the organization isn't supporting it. The other thing is, I think it's going to be very difficult to do it either way if you have a lack of data. As you go through a process like StageGate and you look at the different disciplines and angles that the project's evaluated at, it's really critical that to move a project through an organization that you have the data behind it that suggests it's worth moving forward. So whether that's financial data, intellectual property data, technical data, performance data, I think it's going to be extremely challenging to move anything forward without having data. So I don't know, do you think I answered that properly, Jim? I'm not sure if I missed the question, or do you think that addressed it?
Yeah, I mean, to the person who asked that, Scott's information where you can reach him is on the screen. If that didn't satisfy you enough, I'd ask you to contact Scott directly to talk further about that one.
I mean, Jim, the other thing I'd mentioned is, again, and this is a sign of a leader, is if you think there's something really good and something that should be pushed forward and no one's listening, be willing to stick your neck out. I mean, you've got to take some chances. Everything's not going to fall into place all the time. There's politics, you know, there's this and that. All these different things can end up derailing your idea, your project, or the total process. You need to personally assess, I guess, you know, which battles you want to take on and which ones make sense and which ones don't. But another option there is just to be the person that champions the project. And most projects, I think, that I've been involved in, you know, there was always somebody that really believed in it, and even when things got tough, they kept pushing for it and wanting the organization to stick with it. And sometimes that champion needs to be us.
Yeah, great point. So we've got a whole bunch more questions, and unfortunately, we're already at the end of our hour, Scott. So for those of you who asked questions that we didn't get to, I would encourage you to contact Scott at either the email or phone number on your screen, and I'm sure he'd be happy to talk to you in more detail. So yeah, I apologize for the technical glitch we had with our slide advance, and it was a hair choppy, but I think we got through it okay. So Scott, I thank you again for your excellent insights on innovation, and it was a great hour. So a reminder for those of you on still on the line, the rebroadcast of this presentation will be posted in webinars on demand on IOPP.org. Now in November, we're going to continue exploring the topic of innovation from a bit different perspective, as innovation is an area that IOPP members have requested that we spend a bit more time on this year. So on November 18th, we'll have Ellen DeResta for our next presentation. She's a packaging engineer by background and an innovation and management strategist. And she'll explore innovation from the perspective of validating new ideas in the context of healthcare, which will be part of IOPP Spotlight's focus during November on drug, pharmaceutical, and medical device packaging. So look for more details. They'll be coming to your inbox shortly, or check back on IOPP.org. So Scott, thanks again for a great presentation, and thank all of you for being on the line today. And until next time, have a great day.